Canada has a virtual rainbow of political parties. Yes, these are all active and registered parties with Elections Canada. If I were to talk about all of these, this video would be over an hour long, and nobody has time for that. We'll look at the parties that managed to win at least 1% in the last Canadian federal election according to the official results. Which leaves us with these. Sorry, Rhinoceros Party. As much as I would love to talk about your positions of bribing Weather Network hosts to forecast more sunshine on the weekends, annexing Massachusetts to have more championship sports teams, and replacing teachers with photos of famous scientists, you didn't make the cut. Let's get started with the two big ones. Only the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party and its previous iterations have ever actually formed government in Canada. With a small exception in 1917 during the First World War, when a Unionist party made up of members of both the Liberals and Conservatives ran on a pro-conscription platform and ended up winning. But even then, it was still mostly a Conservative party. The most successful of the Canadian parties has been the Liberal Party. So let's start there. And as a result of this success, sometimes they've actually even been called Canada's natural governing party. The Liberal Party occupies the center-left of the political spectrum. And depending on the vision set forward by the leader at any given time, they tend to move around anywhere in this zone here. In recent years, the Liberal Party has drifted a little bit more to the left and championed issues like fighting climate change through a federal carbon tax, supporting families through the Canadian Child Care Benefit, and a generally open policy towards immigration and refugees. But their more centrist side was still showing when, for example, in 2017, the Liberal Party bought the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project when it was in danger of not moving forward. Now, with once again a new leader, perhaps the Liberal Party might be shifting more towards the center, focusing more on fiscal responsibility, investment in public infrastructure, and diversifying Canada's trade relationships with the rest of the world, while still working on environmental policies aimed at making Canada more sustainable, but with more industry-focused sustainability practices and not so much making Canadians change their lifestyles in the name of environmentalism. The second major party in Canada is the Conservative Party. And the history of the current Conservative Party is a little windy. Under the government of Progressive Conservative Prime Minister Brian Mulroney in the 1980s, a breakaway party called the Reform Party formed, mainly to address feelings of Western alienation. This split in the Conservative vote in the 1990s led to several consecutive Liberal majority governments. The Reform Party renamed itself the Canadian Alliance in 2000, and then recombined with the PC Party in 2003, to form the party we still have today, the Conservative Party of Canada. The Conservatives, or the Tories as they're sometimes known based on their British nickname, are part of the centre-right of the political spectrum in Canada. And these days are moving a little bit to the right of the former Progressive Conservative Party of Canada. They generally hold more socially conservative views and more classical liberal views on economics, such as a focus on lowering taxes, generally more free market economic principles, and programs such as the Canadian Tax-Free Savings Account, which was created under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Lately, they've been very critical of policies that have raised the cost of living in Canada, such as the Liberal carbon tax and the rapidly increasing cost of housing. They have also been critical on social equity outcomes, instead focusing more on providing more equality of opportunity. They're also generally more supportive of Canada's oil and gas industry and have been in favor of building more pipelines. Nevertheless, their centrism does still continue to show with their continued support of things like Canada's universal healthcare, though they are open to exploring more private options within a public system, as well as an unwillingness to open debates on things like abortion rights. Back on the left wing of the spectrum, we have Canada's New Democratic Party, or NDP as they're more commonly called. Even though the NDP have never actually formed government in Canada, their consistent support has given them considerable power in various governments, especially in minority government situations, where their votes have been important in supporting the government in power. They also had an especially strong showing in 2011 when they actually came second to Stephen Harper's Conservative Party and formed the official opposition. The NDP have had some significant contributions to Canada since they were founded in 1961, as a successor to the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, or CCF, a major democratic socialist and labor rights party. It was the CCF in Saskatchewan under Premier Tommy Douglas that implemented Canada's first universal healthcare system. Douglas then worked with Conservative Prime Minister John Diefenbaker and Liberal Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson to bring this universal healthcare project Canada-wide. Bringing together so many distinct parties on one issue, that was quite a feat. Today's NDP continues to focus on some of these social democratic positions, like expanding universal healthcare to include things like dental care and pharmacare, and they're also proponents on policies on racial equity, implementing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, and ideas like student loan forgiveness, building more affordable housing, and new programs like introducing a guaranteed livable income for all Canadians. Let's move on to a party with a very distinct role in Canadian politics, the Bloc Quebecois. They only run candidates in Quebec, which means that even if they won every single seat that they contest, they'd still never be able to form a majority government. But that's not quite what they're in this for. Their political stance is Quebec sovereignty. However, what that has meant over the years has changed. When the party was formed in the early 1990s, it literally meant sovereignty for Quebec, or the establishment of a new nation-state for Quebec, separate from the rest of Canada. The history of all this is complicated, but the most recent attempt at Quebec separatism came in 1995, with a referendum led by the provincial Parti Québécois with support from the Bloc Quebecois. This 1995 referendum was won by the Remain side by the absolute most razor-thin of margins. Since then, the popularity of Quebec separatism has diminished, but the party still sees a lot of support with the people of Quebec in its defense of Quebec language rights and culture. Politically, the Bloc stands on the center-left side of the spectrum. They've advocated for things like reducing greenhouse gas emissions to fight climate change, reducing wait times for immigration applications, and ensuring that the Canadian federal government continues to fund public health care. Another one of the smaller parties in the Canadian ecosystem is the Green Party of Canada. As you can imagine, they're also on this crowded left side of the political spectrum with a focus on environmentalism and sustainability. In the 21st century, they've managed anywhere between 3 and 7% of the popular vote in Canadian federal elections, and they elected their first member of parliament in 2011 when Green Party leader Elizabeth May was elected as the MP from Saanich Gulf Islands in British Columbia. Aside from their focus on environmental sustainability, the Greens have also ran on platforms like student loan forgiveness and even making post-secondary education free in Canada, a guaranteed livable income similarly to the NDP, and universal childcare. In terms of Indigenous relations in Canada, they have advocated for an immediate implementation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. Finally, we have one of the newest parties in the Canadian political landscape, the People's Party of Canada. They were formed by former Conservative Party member Maxime Bernier, who basically believed that the Conservative Party just wasn't right-wing enough. So that puts them all the way here on the political spectrum. Some of the People's Party's core beliefs are a general skepticism about climate change, meaning they advocate for the withdrawal from several sustainability programs and initiatives. They also promote the deregulation of industry, limiting immigration, and less of a focus on Canada's official multiculturalism policy, and instead promoting the cultural integration of newcomers. There we have it. Lots of voices in the Canadian political system from several credible parties, even though only 2 of them have actually ever been able to form government. This is part of a long-standing debate here in Canada. Do we actually have a multi-party system, or is it really just a 2-party system in disguise? Would we be better off without our third parties, or do they enrich our political viewpoints and debates? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you learned something today, give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you again next time.